The 2021 Champions League final was among all things an opportunity for Josep Guardiola to be done with the grave injustice. At that moment, he hadn't won the tournament for a decade, since 2011 when Wembley saw his Barcelona demolish Ferguson's Manchester United. In 2021, however, Guardiola had to suffer defeat as his overcomplicated game plan gave City's opponents an upper hand. As a result, Man City had to wait for 2 more years until Pep at last put an end to his abnormal bad luck in the Champions League, as the 22-23 brought a treble to his team. In this video, we're going to retrace the evolution of his ideas, his football, and his personal improvement. So watch it until the end, and you'll surely agree that Josep Guardiola is by far the most obsessed head coach in the whole world. But first, we would like you to answer our question. Which one of these head coaches suffered the most defeats against Josep Guardiola? Jose Mourinho, Mauricio Pochettino, Sean Dyche. Barcelona. Guardiola is often criticized for managing only the biggest clubs and most elite footballers. But people seem to forget about the early stages of Pep's coaching career, when he was coaching Barcelona B in the 4th division of Spanish football. In his first season, Guardiola won the league with style, thus promoting his side to Segunda B. And that success had a lot to do with the changes he made. A bunch of Barca B players later made it into the first team. The likes of Pedro, Thiago and Busquets grew into world-class players, while other academy products such as Hefren and Victor Vázquez were given a chance as well. But the one who really thrived under Guardiola was Sergio Busquets. The aspiring coach saw the copy of himself in that lanky youngster, as Pep used to be a player of a similar kind, a holding midfielder lacking pace but with an incredible sense of space and time. At that time, possession was already among the cornerstones of Guardiola's football, while the midfield was essential to his 4-3-3 formation. I don't want you to dribble the ball like Messi. Pass, pass and pass. This is what I expect from you. Find the space, get the ball and pass it. I want your every decision to be smart and every pass precise. This will be the difference between us and other teams. This is what Guardiola used to tell his players at Barcelona B. Later, when he joined the first team, he brought that approach with him. It was summer 2008, and Barca had been trophyless for 2 years, which was embarrassing for such a star-packed team. Henry, Deco, Ronaldinho and Eto'o were among the best footballers of their time, but many of them had to leave the club to give way for the talented youth. Joan Laporta, the then president, put his trust in the young Guardiola instead of the more renowned coach Jose Mourinho. As rumors say, the Portuguese never really forgave Barca and once back to Spain, declared war on the Blaugrana. Guardiola got rid of Ronaldinho and Deco, which gave him an opportunity to instill his vision of football in his team without having to look back on the stars. Possession was the key. They won't score as long as we have the ball. This postulate was erected into an absolute and made Barcelona a team that could be beaten only with the help of massive luck. The midfield trio, Busquets, Iniesta and Xavi, was the essence of Barca's football, as their pinpoint passing and nearly flawless decision-making were too much to bear for their opponents. Along with Dani Alves making attacking runs on the right, Messi exploring space and Henry and Eto'o in the attack, they won 14 out of 19 possible trophies under Guardiola. At the same time, Spain, with many Barca footballers playing key roles, was dominating the football world. And that was not a coincidence. As Guardiola later said, he learned a lot about tactics from his own players, which proved that the coach and the team were meant for each other. The players were a perfect fit for Guardiola's philosophy. The 2 Champions League finals were probably the peak of that Guardiola side. Tiki-taka in its finest, which left no chance for Manchester United in 2009 and 2011. Here's what Sir Alex Ferguson had to say after the second final. "We weren't good enough to match these Barcelona. It's the best team I have ever faced. Nobody's given us a hiding like that, but they deserve it. They play the right way and they enjoy their football." Interestingly, Guardiola never stopped his experiments, despite having such a dominant team. It was him to move Messi to a false nine position, thus developing him into one of the greatest footballers ever. Apart from that, he gave freedom to Dani Alves, so that the Brazilian was not only making impact as a wingback, but also helping the midfielders in the build-up phase. Josep Guardiola showed the world how important a goalkeeper's footwork is, thus setting a trend with the help of Victor Valdés. And not to forget his experiments with formations, as Pep tried to implement a 3-at-the-back formation with Ibrahimovic as a target man in attack. Though that one experiment didn't pay off, we must give credit to Guardiola for his desire to try new things and keep learning. Bayern. In summer 2012, Guardiola left the club as he ruled out his return while that Barca board was in charge. By that time, Laporta had already been succeeded by Sandro Rosell, the one that got accused of corruption a few years later, and after that there was Josep Bartomeu, who was no better. As for Pep, he had a year-long break, spent his time in New York, and then got back to business at Bayern. The Bayern project looked like a perfect fit for Guardiola. Elite players, domestic dominance, and of course money to spend on new signings. But in reality, Pep had to adapt to a brand new environment, a different country with a different culture and mentality. Apart from that, his predecessor, Jupp Heynckes, had just won the treble with Bayern, so the new manager had to deal with the enormous pressure. Though Pep didn't drop his possession-based philosophy, with time he made a couple of adjustments to get the most out of the players he had. Toni Kroos and later Xabi Alonso made him implement more long balls, while Robert Lewandowski made him at last use a classic centre-forward after the coach had been trying to make a false nine out of Robben or Ribéry. Though Guardiola stuck to his trademark 4-3-3 at first, he later rediscovered Philippe Lahm as an inverted fullback, as the captain showed how important it may be to have a fullback with good passing skills. That is something Guardiola keeps using nowadays. There were a number of experiments concerning the formation as well, as Pep was trying different variations of 3-4-3 and 4-2-3-1, with Alonso and Lahm as two pivots. At the same time, Guardiola mastered his usage of inverted wingers. Robben and Ribéry would constantly cut inside to make a through ball or take a shot, while the wingbacks stayed wide. That decision was also beneficial to his pressing system. His Barcelona would keep the ball and try to get back in defense as soon as possible once it's lost. Guardiola's Bayern in turn implemented the gegenpressing system, which implied winning the possession back in 5 seconds' time. Bayern's possessioning was becoming more and more fluid, and the players' positions conditional. Guardiola created an extremely flexible team, as the players were given freedom to utilize their football intelligence. Such a system reinforced Bayern as the Bundesliga hegemon, as with Guardiola in charge they won 3 league titles, while they also broke a number of records in terms of goals scored, clean sheets and points gained. But Guardiola's craving for experiments ultimately became the reason for Bayern's outrageous performance in the Champions League. In 2014, Bayern's over-aggressive approach was countered by Real Madrid in the semi-final. Ronaldo and the company demolished the German side 4-0, and Pep later claimed that very game plan to be his biggest ever mistake. A year later, once again in the Champions League semi-final, it was Guardiola's old friend Lionel Messi, along with Suarez and Neymar, to beat Bayern and later win the trophy for Barcelona. All things considered, Guardiola's Bayern spell is going to be remembered for his crazy experiments with tactics and players' roles, more detailed approach towards the club's coaching staff, and 2 humiliating defeats in the Champions League. It was an important stage of his evolution as a coach. After Pep had left Barca as the inventor of the deadly tiki-taka, his time at Bayern made him recognized as the creator and the trendsetter. Here is what Guardiola recalled. In Munich, in the first month, I wanted to play similar to Barca. I woke up one day and said I had to adapt to the players. We did it, and this is the most important thing for a manager. Manchester City. Guardiola could have easily stayed at Bayern for a decade. The board would have gladly extended his contract while the players were begging for him to stay. but Pep's decision was to take up a new challenge and move to England. However, all conditions had been created for him by that time. The City board members Chiqui Begiristain and Ferran Soriano were those who worked with Guardiola at Barca, so the plan was quite simple. The club trusts Guardiola, accepts his demands concerning the vision of football and signs the players he needs. After Guardiola's first season at City, it looked like the club had made a strategic mistake. The citizens finished third in the league, 15 points behind the champions Chelsea. Guardiola's side was all too vulnerable to pressing, slow off the ball and primitive in attack. Guardiola was accused of being too stubborn with his principles, and the manager himself had to admit that he had never encountered such a football. I need to mind minor differences between the Premier League and other leagues, but overall I like the way we play. They tackle a lot in England, and I don't spend my time practicing tackles. I just want my team to play well and score a lot of goals, Guardiola once said. But in the end, he had to adapt to the new environment, so next season we heard him say a most shocking thing. Tiki-taka is a load of shit, a made-up term. I won't allow my brilliant players to fall for that rubbish. And Guardiola was being genuine, as his City was becoming more and more straightforward team. Kevin De Bruyne was the embodiment of Pep's new approach. While the midfielder's passing accuracy of 70% would be considered a disaster back in his Barca years, it became the norm at Man City, as the Belgian was encouraged to make more risky passes for the sake of creating chances. Another important stage was bringing new defenders to the club. The likes of Laporte, Mendy, Walker, Stones, Dias, Cancelo and others cost the citizens almost 500 million euros. Only Todd Bowley's Chelsea managed to match these mind-blowing spendings. But that was essential to Guardiola's vision of football, as he was in dire need of technically gifted defenders capable of carrying and passing the ball. In the end, despite Stones and his mistakes, Mendy and his temper, after many experiments with Walker's position as the Englishman would play as a centre-back and on the right, Guardiola finally built the team he wanted. Today's Manchester City is a prime example of defensively solid side with defenders and goalkeepers denying their opponents high pressing with short passing. Another example of Guardiola's influence is Alexander Zinchenko. Once a centre midfielder, he developed into a world-class inverted fullback. Guardiola, in turn, praised the Ukrainian's decision-making and football intelligence, as these qualities made up for the player's lack of quality in defense. The first-ever transfer window under Guardiola gave us a hint of what to expect from Manchester City. They paid 55 million euros for the Everton defender Stones, 32 for the no-name Brazilian Gabriel Jesus, and 27 for Gundogan from Borussia Dortmund. It was obviously that Pep's priority was to achieve balance while in possession, the cornerstone of his football. As for the other signings, there was the Schalke winger Leroy Sané, a promising youngster at that time. His experiments, however, were not limited to giving creative freedom to midfielders and implementing a hybrid formation. Guardiola was constantly developing his ideas concerning inverted fullbacks and wingers, as well as a sweeper keeper, which worked out pretty well. Man City gained 100 points in the 17-18 Premier League season and have only lost one league title since then. With the years, City looked less and less like Guardiola's team, as their possession numbers kept dropping with each subsequent year. Numbers speak louder than words. In the 17-18 season, City made about 700 crosses, while there were more than 900 in each of the last two seasons. Here's what Guardiola had to say about his team's development. "I've learned a lot at City. I'm a completely different manager now. You can't have the same ideas of 12 or 13 years ago. You become lazy and lose motivation. Not only does evolution help you achieve success, but also makes you feel less bored." But there were still systematic problems to deal with. The lack of centre-forward was one of them. Guardiola tried to solve it in his own way at first, using a false nine instead. In the 2021 Champions League semi-finals against PSG, the nominal midfielders Foden, Mahrez and De Bruyne played in the attack, while the centre midfielder Gundogan became the team's best goalscorer in all competitions. The team's Champions League record was once again the fly in the ointment, as Guardiola's experiments would backfire time after time. Apart from that, City had to suffer from bad luck. Just think of Llorente's handball or Sterling's horrendous miss against Lyon. And of course, that very defeat in the 2021 final against Chelsea, a team of much less quality and balance. But in summer 2022, it all changed, as Guardiola got himself Erling Haaland, an absolute beast of a striker, though nearly useless in combination game. So the question was the star newcomer a good fit to Guardiola's vision of football? Before long we got an answer, and the answer was yes. Pep once again made a couple of tweaks as his players were given instructions to cross the ball more often and rely on counter-attacks a bit more. As a result, Haaland became the one to distract opponents, thus creating space for his teammates. This innovation was among the reasons for Man City's marvelous performance against Real Madrid in the semi-final. Even though Haaland didn't score, he drew the attention of all the Los Blancos defenders, which made life much easier for his teammates. And by the way, there is a video about Haaland on our channel, so feel free to check it out if you wish to reveal the star striker's secret. Of course, Man City's domestic triumph could never be achieved without massive spendings and signing players according to the coach's needs. Their approach did pay off in the end, as now it looks the best way to make things work both on and off the pitch. The final against Inter was a most deserved reward for Josep Guardiola. The third Champions League trophy in his coaching career left no doubt. Guardiola is one of his kind, and not only because of the three magnificent teams he created. Pep never stopped improving, setting new trends and changing the face of football. Isn't that the meaning of greatness?